Episode 9 of the Average Joe Sports Show with Schmidt, and plenty of ball to get into after the bye.
Mitch Sherman here. We'll talk about Carter Nelson's visit to Notre Dame.
This is Bill Doleman, and when did Nebraska and Northwestern become a rivalry?
And we'll wrap up the show by talking about the college football game that everyone can't stop talking about, Iowa over Wisconsin.
Welcome to it, episode 9 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Chris Schmidt, Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, Elijah Herbel. Find us on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show, on Twitter/X, the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify, Apple, wherever you download your podcast. Fellas, the bye week is done, and it's time to resume Nebraska's push for 6 or beyond.
It is. What'd you guys do on the bye week? Did you have anything
Recovered.
notable?
A lot of recovery.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. Got my body rested.
Matt Rule's big into that. He's really big into recovery. That's
No
why
kidding.
they built this new facility, or what the changes that he made to the new facility to assist with the recovery for us, I presume.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I tried to get in there, but key didn't work, so I was turned away.
That's just an oversight. Go back next weekend.
Warm-up suit
The
on.
fob I had from the 90s didn't work on the door.
They've changed the code and the locks. I love it. You're going MacGyver over the wall trying to sneak in. But no, man, I just hung out on the couch. I saw great football. We'll get to later on in the show. That 2:30 window. I mean, in I'm a YouTube TV guy, so
yes.
All 4 windows on my big screen had a game in each corner, and I was in hog heaven.
You got to see the modern day or futuristic Big Ten on one corner with Washington, Oregon.
I did.
And you got to see the 1960s version of the Big Ten, with Iowa and Wisconsin.
And somewhere in between with Maryland and Illinois.
Yeah.
So
I made it out on Friday to a high school football game that I really enjoyed. Most of my high school football watching previously this season has been limited to the 2 teams in Gretna where I've got family connections and reasons to go that involve kids in my neighborhood and stuff like that. But I went to the Omaha West Side Millard South game to watch the 2 teams who I thought going in were the 2 best high school football teams in the state, and I came out of it still thinking that, and saw a ton of Power 5 talent on the field. So it was a big weekend, I think, for Nebraska with recruiting developments, and then there were also some developments on the field on Friday night in that game at Buell Stadium. Beautiful weather, by the way, just perfect football weather. It was like on one side of the field, the home side, where we sat, for weather reasons only. It did not have a dog in the race. I was with my 12-year-old and then a friend / neighbor and his 14-year-old, and we sat on the Millard South side, and it was calm winds, mid-40s, and then on the west side edge of the field, on the opposite end, on the east side, that's not protected by the big new press box. I think it was like 10 degrees colder.
Wow.
And raining.
Wow.
It was raining. You could see it in the lights.
pure Nebraska weather.
But it was not raining on the west side of the field, the home cooking. I don't know how they do that.
But
we were in a dome.
You say that the top 2 teams, but didn't it really kind of turn out to be one really, really good team and the team that's currently second?
I'll tell you what.
West Side's pretty good.
Midway through the fourth quarter, Anthony Rizak, the West Side quarterback, dropped back to throw, got sacked, fumbled. Millard South picked it up, ran it in for a touchdown. It was 17-14 at that point with 6 or 7 minutes to go, and it felt like it was pretty electric in that stadium. It felt like this is the game that you hoped would happen, but didn't really think would happen because there is all that talent on the West Side sideline. Millard South, it's all young guys. Their quarterback, Jet Tamala, 2026 prospect. He's a sophomore. Big-time receiver at Millard South. Amarian Jackson is a name to know in this state. They very much held their own for portions of that game with West Side. But in the end, Anthony Rizak, the quarterback who I mentioned that had the strip sack, touchdown return, He was hurt on that play, laying on the ground as Millard South is celebrating in the end zone, down just 3 points. They'd come back from 17 down, and it looked like Rizak was coming out. And we were maybe going to see Braylon Warren, who is Steve Warren's freshman son at Omaha West Side, come into that game in the middle of the fourth quarter. Well, Rizak gathered his wits, came back out on the field, and led a long scoring drive to put that game on ice. So I think we're going to see a repeat of that at Memorial Stadium in November.
And one of my favorite things about games of that magnitude, whenever you have future Division I players on the field, is sometimes games like that come down to a matchup between a future Power 5 starter at the Division I level up against a future actuary scientist, like gonna be a frat star here in about 12 months, but right now he's got to lock up a Division I athlete. Like that's some of my favorite things about those high school football games. And sometimes the future business major or actuary scientist or what have you does pretty well and can win the team the game, but other times you see the real talent gap there. And that's what can make high school football so fun at times, is whenever you do get that Division I talent on the field, you get to see what they do against some people who are in 15 years going to be average Joes. For now, they're great athletes, don't get me wrong, but they're not Division I superstars by any means. So,
future journalism major,
yeah.
Right? and guy who talks about it.
That was
used
me.
To play.
I got to play next to a future Division I player. He made me look a hell of a lot better than I was. So thanks, Bryce, and tip my hat to you.
I'm kind of impressed by the names that we have, in Nebraska nowadays that are making headlines. We've got Gunners and Brocks and Jets and Omarians.
Yes.
Wow, moms and dads out there getting creative and setting the tone for their kids early.
Nebraska, this is not your, your grandfather's Nebraska high school football scene. Teams are throwing the ball all over the field.
Dick and Jerry,
right,
Bill,
William and Christopher.
Right, it's fun to watch, and West Side is a really, really talented team. They've of course got the Rizak twins with Anthony, as I mentioned, the quarterback. Teddy Rizak, committed to Notre Dame. He's a big time safety. The thing about Teddy Rizak is that on any other team in the state of Nebraska, I think his numbers and the way that he would look and how he'd show up on the highlight reels, it would be off the charts. And at Westside, he's kind of just another piece. They've got guys all around him. Christian Jones, who's a big-time 2025 linebacker with offers from Notre Dame and Penn State. And you wonder, who's this Rizak kid, this Teddy Rizak kid who's committed to Notre Dame? You don't see him all that much, but when he does, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to show up. When he does show up, he's kind of a heat-seeking missile for them. So they're it's an embarrassment of riches right now for the defending champs.
They're a ton of fun to watch. Now, when you venture out to high school football, we're into the autumn wind portion of high school football and college football season. Mitch, you got to dress warm.
Mm-hmm.
And
I did not wear a coat.
No, I know you didn't, but you were in that part of Nebraska that was domed. But if you're out recruiting or checking in on recruits, I mean, you got to dress for the weather, don't you?
Yes, I know where you're going
or
with
go
this.
find someone.
Well, you've got that, and you've already talked about Notre Dame about 3 or 4 times, which people are getting a little paranoid around here. And Matt Perula certainly alluded to all of those things without saying Notre Dame specifically, but talked about the weather. And how many times did he say Ainsworth in his press conference on Monday? 3 or 4 times?
It was 3 or 4 times. So
are we going to do that today? Are we going to just talk about Carter Nelson without mentioning the name Carter Nelson?
Well, you just did now.
I know I did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Well,
could have been fun.
let's go into the deep end of the pool here. Carter Nelson, amazing player from Ainsworth, tight end, and I gotta go see Touchdown Jesus and Notre Dame smoke USC.
what a game to see. Can we talk about Xavier Watts?
Yeah.
The Omaha Burke graduate.
Burke talent,
Represent the
white
Bulldogs
out now
here.
safety.
Yes. Changed positions during his career, big-time wideout coming out of Omaha Burke. It was Xavier Watts, Xavier, that's the pronunciation, and then Xavier Betts out of Bellevue West.
Mm-hmm.
And their careers have gone in some interesting directions. Xavier Betts, of course, is twice now removed from the Nebraska football team by his own decisions, not in college football. And Xavier Watts has gone from being a wide receiver at Notre Dame to now the guy who intercepted Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams twice, took back a scoop and score touchdown in that game in the fourth quarter, and forced a fumble. So when the awards come out early this week, which will be after this episode likely airs, I think you're going to see, or before this episode airs, you're going to see Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, the Omaha kid, who is probably the National Player of the Week by some estimations. So he did this in front of a large group or a legion of travelers from the state of Nebraska that included those Rezac twins that I mentioned, and Carter Nelson, the Nebraska commit from this summer, who made an unofficial visit out to Notre Dame to see the Irish play against USC on Saturday night, which is eye-opening and noteworthy for people in the state of Nebraska, including Matt Rule, who was in Ainsworth, as we've mentioned, the night before on Friday for homecoming, and to watch those Ainsworth 8-man Stars punch their ticket to the Class D1. Is that what it is? I
believe so.
Playoffs. So Rule bought a parka and a hat.
And shout out to, is it Ranchland Western?
Yeah, let me look this up. Ranchland Western is the local retail establishment, the outfitter that was fortunate enough to have Coach Rule as a customer, and he talked about that on Monday at his news conference at Memorial Stadium. So, Ranchland Western, you've played a part now in making Matt Rule feel more welcome in Ainsworth.
That is if the kid does actually sign on the dotted line. If he doesn't, then it's going to be Ranchland. Why didn't you get him a warmer coat or something? Could have made it happen for Nebraska.
I want to know about the hat. Are we talking stocking hat with the little ball on top? Is it a skull cap, or is it a rip hat from Yellowstone? Since it is a Western outfitter.
This is going to require a little bit more reporting to find that out.
I know, but I just wonder what kind of hat. I would think it's a stocking hat to keep your ears warm.
But it was interesting though to hear Rule talk about specifically that I was in Omaha for this game. I was in Western Iowa for this, and made a trip to Ainsworth. While I was in Ainsworth, I took a lot of photos. I bought a jacket in Ainsworth, and I
really enjoyed Ainsworth.
Ainsworth's a great community.
Beautiful this time of year.
Have you all been to Ainsworth?
Been through it, yeah.
And of course, look, that's just the era of recruiting that we are in. Once somebody commits, it means pretty much absolutely nothing until they actually sign on the dotted line, and you have to protect those that you have at least done a pretty good sales job on at least once, and then you just got to continue to sell them and fight off any potential suitors, which apparently Notre Dame is for the services of Carter Nelson, which, look, if you got to fly a private plane to get there in a reasonable amount of time, mom and dad ought to be saying, look, Carter, we love you, buddy, but if we're going to come see you play, we're not getting the same kind of service to get to South Bend that you got on Friday night. We got to drive 4 hours to Omaha, catch a flight to Chicago, get a car, make our trip to South Bend. It's going to be very, very difficult for that family logistically to see him play over the next 4 years, unless Dad decides he doesn't want to coach high school football anymore.
Right. High school football and track, his responsibilities out in Ainsworth, and they're pretty connected to that community. So I have a hard time seeing them, packing up and moving to Omaha in order to be closer to an airport to go see Carter play. But I think that's one thing that Nebraska certainly has in its favor and had in its favor when Carter Nelson in the summer took official visits to Notre Dame and to Georgia. He had to get up at close to midnight to get to Omaha to catch a flight to Atlanta and then drive to Athens for his official visit to Georgia. And he cited that as a reason for why Nebraska felt like the fit for him when he committed. And none of that has changed. Really, getting to South Bend is not a whole lot easier than it is.
There's been no plate tectonic shift.
Right. But, these 8 words that Matt Rule said in his press conference today when he was asked about his players and some of his players who are now being recruited or have continued to be recruited by other schools through this process, some of his committed players, he said, we're not backing down from anybody in recruiting. And I think that was a strong statement. That was not off the cuff. That's something that Matt Rule has a message that he's relayed to his committed players, to his staff, and wants everybody to understand that just because Notre Dame has come calling for Carter Nelson, and because he had a meeting on Sunday morning with Marcus Freeman in the coach's offices, and they were at the game to see Notre Dame knock off big bad USC and Heisman winner Caleb Williams, Nebraska's not planning to give an inch in this thing. If they lose Carter Nelson, it's because they went down swinging.
Wanted to get your pulse, your gauge on that threat level. I know he took a private jet. We've laid out what's easiest for mom and dad to watch him. But right now, is it a coin flip? Do gather he's still solid with Nebraska, but had an opportunity to go check out a pretty good game. And Rule laid out that there's 2 tiers of recruits as well that he touched on, and that's very real. If a guy's wanted by everybody, you're going to be patient. If there's somebody else out there that, okay, we think you're a good player, we like you, but there's, for lack of a better term, my term, you're replaceable, then we'll go look somewhere else.
Yeah, Carter Nelson fits into tier 1.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the guy that Nebraska will wait until signing day and do everything it has to do. Rule also said that he's never going to get mad about recruiting a player. So even after a player is committed to his school, if they have to continue to recruit that player, then that's what they're going to do. So Carter Nelson, tier 1, they will take this thing down to the last hour on signing day morning if that's what it requires to get him to sign that letter of intent. And he'll be in Lincoln on Saturday for the Northwestern game. He's coming with some high school teammates of his while Carter's parents go to watch Carter's sister play volleyball. She's at Northeast Community College. So, their roots in this state are deep. So if the question is, how big of a threat is Notre Dame truly to flip Carter Nelson from his Nebraska commitment? I think if you ask the people at Notre Dame, and I've talked to some people who cover Notre Dame, they felt if they could get him to come for a visit, that they stood a good chance. In Nebraska, from the Nebraska perspective, the fact that he came back and his father said last night he's still committed to Nebraska, they didn't want to engage in any conversations while at Notre Dame about a potential flip. His focus right now is on his high school season and winning a state championship. We all understand that the state playoffs for Carter Nelson, even if he gets all the way to Memorial Stadium, are going to end in plenty of time before the signing period opens so that he could change his mind. And I think he is going to give this some thought. But generally, if you're going to flip a guy like this, it's going to happen right after a visit. When they're emotionally connected. Once you get time to get home and reevaluate things and come back to Lincoln for another game or maybe another 2 or 3 games still here in October and November, the longer it goes with him remaining committed to Nebraska, the more I like Nebraska's chances to keep him in this class.
Don't you think, too, that especially in small-town Nebraska, that there is something about coming back to your community that when you get back and you see your buddies and you see the guy who owns the grocery store down the block or the Western store, at the end of town, that you do feel a sense of not just that you committed to Nebraska, but the town committed to Nebraska to a certain extent, that you were carrying that hometown proud with you when you get a chance to play Memorial Stadium. And I think that's different when you are a superstar athlete in Miami or in Los Angeles or someplace. You come back and you come home to that warm blanket, you are taking those people with you to Memorial Stadium. And I would really have a hard time, especially after you've had the press conference and you unveil the shirt and you're staying home. And now to tell those same people, nah, I'm going to go. I think that'd be a really, really hard thing to do for a kid like that. No matter how heralded you are, you've got that whole community with you that was really, really excited. I know it's your own decision, but still, there's something different about being a small-town kid from Nebraska or from any other state around the country when you've got an opportunity to play for dear old Nebraska, or Wyoming or whatever. It's a big deal.
I agree. And he can look, he's also going to look at the football programs, and he's going to look at the condition of Nebraska's football program with the latest evidence that he's got. So these next 6 games, or maybe the next 4 games before he, locks things in, are important for Nebraska to continue to look like the kind of team that he wants to play for. And, as Matt Rule said today, their offense today and what they run today, because of the players that they have and the type of team this is, being defensive-oriented, this is not the team offensively that they're going to be in the future. They're going to run tempo. They're going to feature speed. They're going to do things that look more spreadish in terms of their offensive style. That's just not who they are today. And Carter Nelson doesn't have to play for this team. He gets to play for the future Nebraska football offense, which, could be an exciting brand of football. At the same time, Notre Dame is sending tight ends to the NFL. They are in the top 10, contending for the college football playoff. They just beat USC. So there's a lot for him to weigh, and I do think that factor of being from a small town is important to consider. Matt Rule was in this situation with a tight end last year at this time, or shortly after this time, when he got on the ground in Nebraska, and there was a tight end from Pierce, Nebraska, Ben Bramer, who was committed to Nebraska and committed to the old staff with Scott Frost and then with Mickey Joseph. And he decommitted, looked things over. Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield went to Pierce, met with Ben and his father at kind of the 11th hour in recruiting, and he went to Iowa State and is having a great freshman season right now at Iowa State. So the difference there is that they've had a year with Carter Nelson to bring him in, to bring him through the program in the summer, to get to see all the things that they didn't get to show Ben Bramer on campus. And it would be a real difficult blow for Nebraska to lose that kind of tight end 2 years in a row from small-town Nebraska. So this is an important one for Matt Rule to continue to recruit and do the job that's needed on the field in showing him the kind of offense that he can be in, or the kind of program that he can be a part of, and off the field to keep pace with whatever efforts Notre Dame is making over this last month or so.
And with those efforts that Notre Dame's making, I did want to say, you never know with a kid like Carter Nelson. Maybe he just wants to check a big college football rivalry game off his bucket list. Hey, got a chance to go to USC, Notre Dame. Let's check it off the bucket list.
Private jet, why not? I mean, think about putting yourself in those shoes. If, all right, they're still after me. This is USC Notre Dame.
Oh, I get a free sideline ticket?
Yeah,
and a private flight to the game?
I'm there, and they're gonna give me some gear. I mean, let's go make it happen.
But one thing Nebraska does have in this recruitment as a trump card that they did not have in that Bramer recruitment, and speaking of Bramer, caught a touchdown on Saturday. I'm not sure if you guys saw that, but Mitch has kind of laid out. He is having a very good freshman year, already burned the red shirt. Looks like he's going to be a big piece for Iowa State moving forward. But what Matt Rule has here is the ability to say, hey, son, you want to blow up South Stadium? You can push the button. That's a big trump card in this recruitment that you can pull.
Who gets to do that? Who gets that's yeah.
You can't blow up a quarter of Notre Dame Stadium. You can't blow up Touchdown Jesus. You can blow up South Stadium, son.
Trev's going to do that, right? Trev gets to push the button.
No, there'll be an auction for who gets to do it.
If that's what it takes to get Carter Nelson, I think Carter Nelson can blow up that stadium if he wants to.
Well, plenty
blow it up in another way.
Yeah, no kidding. Find your way into the end zone. But Average Joe Sports Show, plenty of recruiting thoughts on our mind, and Nebraska back in action. Find the show and check it out on YouTube. Subscribe there, the AJ Sports Show. Also on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod, and Spotify and iTunes for the audio portion. But pretty interesting and great insight, Mitch and Bill. Loved your thoughts. You too, Elijah, with just where Nebraska's at and the hunt that is Carter Nelson here to keep him in the boat and fend off Notre Dame. Let's talk about on the field, and Nebraska gets to resume their push for 6 and beyond, and some good health news with Reimer going to be back. Pretty good presser today as we tape Monday from Matt Rule, not only on the recruiting part, but the rabbit ears that still are apparent in the program with how that has scarred, his word, some of the kids in the program just noticing what's going on. Pro Football Focus and those ratings, kids may be paying too much attention to that. But you have Luke Reimer back. That's one voice that they gladly listen to in that locker room. Yeah,
Luke Reimer, the senior inside linebacker who's been out for the better part of 3 weeks, had that infection in his arm, and he's now going to be back with the team, ready to play on Saturday against Northwestern. And Matt Rule mentioned what an important voice Luke Reimer has for this defense. You used that word, Chris, voice, and I think that's key. They still got to hear from him in the games that he missed. He talked to his teammates, helped them through that mentally, but for him to be on the field as the tackling machine, he's been Nebraska's most consistent defensive player for the better part of a couple years with just his ability to get to the ball and make plays. It's a huge addition that Nebraska needs to have back. They've been able to fill that hole because of the depth that Tony White, the defensive coordinator, has created through the first half of this season. But now to have Nick Henrich and Javen Wright and Luke Reimer all out there manning the same couple of positions, it should make the black shirts that much stronger.
What's significant about his return is he'll be back and be motivated. He didn't get a chance to take part in that last game against Illinois, which was kind of a black shirt defining game, I think, for this Nebraska team. They won the game clearly in Champaign. and he gets to now be back a part of it, back home for a key stretch run to get this team in bowl position. So I think that's significant for a guy who's already motivated. I mean, I think we all enjoy watching him play, and after JoJo Doleman left, Reimer steps into that role and has been a defensive heart and soul since he's become the regular. But again, the positive, to talk about that we've talked about, I think, week after week, is so many guys have played defensively that they've had a chance to play significant snaps early on. And the effort that we've seen from Luke Gifford in a starring role, if you will, I think it exemplifies how this defense has been able to evolve and play important roles that when they are definitely called upon, you're not looking at somebody who's coming off the bench cold, kind of like what we're seeing in the receiver position. That has not had the same type of evolution that the defense has had. So when Reimer goes out, Gifford's out there, you're not surprised to see him play that well. Javin Wright, has played extremely well, and so many players have played significant snaps. That's why I think the defense is just going to get better and better as the season goes on. But you haven't had that where inexperience has been forced into the lineup. Like you said, Malachi Coleman's a starter now. Like, okay, wonder what we're going to see. Well, when Gifford's out there, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. A little perspective, and this is what Reimer gets to come back to, is an opportunity where Nebraska's a double-digit favorite and has a chance to move to 4-3. They had a winning record. This team has not had a winning record since September of 2021. Just at any point. And that was after...
At any point?
At any point. And that was, losing the season opener. Last year you lose to Georgia Southern to go to 1-2, never got above 500. This year you start with 2 losses, haven't been above 500. So 4-3 would represent the first time Nebraska's been above 500 in October since 2016. And first time it's been above 500 at all since September of 2021 when it had those memorable back-to-back wins against Fordham and Buffalo. So, it's not like Luke Reimer's walking back out there in circumstances that he's accustomed to, this is just ho-hum, I'm back, let's go. You're right. I think the motivation factor for him coming back to this defense and being a big piece of it is high going into this because of the stakes. And, somebody else at Oklahoma or Notre Dame or Florida State might look at this and say, what are the stakes? You're 3-3. Where's this team going this year? 6-6? That's your goal? Hey, at Nebraska, when you've had the struggles that this program has had for the entirety of the careers of everyone on the roster, it would mean a lot to beat Northwestern and move to 4-3 going into the last week or second to last week of October.
Rule made a point to hammer down how this program has been down the stretch. And it's been a 1-5 program, and you've had these moments at 500 to move past, to your point, and the motivation's very great for all these guys, the COVID seniors and beyond, to get to that promised land of a bowl game, yet it's got to be 1 rep / 1 week at a time. Back to some of the looking past discussion that Rule also addressed today, but that just tells you and reinforces October of 2016, when you had the last time you had that winning record in October.
Actually, 2019. I'm seeing this.
Okay.
2019, Nebraska was 4-2 on October 5th, and then lost its next 4 games.
Right.
So 1 week, couple weeks in October of 2019. Otherwise, it's been 2016.
But it just hammers home the point of how far down it's been, and this needs to be a different October for Nebraska. It needs to be a different November, and it's while we can talk about the bigger picture, that's not what Rule's really focused on, is that big picture.
He wants them to go week to week, and he says, "I don't want to." Yeah, he's aware of the how that sounds, and he talked about coach speak today, and that's not really what he's going for here. But the word that he used in talking about the second halves of the last several seasons, he said 8 to 10 years at Nebraska, second halves of the season have been abysmal. So, that's really just basically laying it out. He's working, and he says, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. We're not calling anyone out here. But in essence, he's saying that the teams that have and the coaches that have come before him have done something tremendously wrong in the second halves of these recent seasons, and it is a focus of his to reverse that trend and get this team to take it week by week and not worry about whether Maryland looks good from one week to the next, or what might be happening at Wisconsin. You can watch games during Nebraska's bye week and really get ahead of yourself and say, Maryland lost to Illinois and Wisconsin lost to Iowa, and Wisconsin's starting quarterback broke his hand and he's out for several weeks. Is he going to play in the Nebraska game? And what about the Iowa tight end who went out in that game against the Badgers? That's not what Matt Rule's looking for here. He wants a team that's focused this week on Northwestern and Northwestern only.
Well, how many times has Northwestern also stung Nebraska? I mean, they have been a major thorn in the side of Nebraska with some good teams that went to a Big Ten championship game and some teams that didn't have many wins, didn't even go bowling.
Every single loss Nebraska's had to Northwestern since they joined the Big Ten has been a one-score loss. That's what the Northwestern series has been. And since 2017, you're 2-4 against the Wildcats. All 4 of those losses were one score, and all 6 of Nebraska's losses all time since you joined the Big Ten were one-score losses.
Look, no disrespect, okay? Which means
you're going to start
coming.
Get the shovel ready.
But when Nebraska signed on to the Big Ten more than, 10 years ago, 12 years ago or more, I don't think anybody saw a rivalry with Northwestern on the radar, right? That was just not what people considered. If Nebraska's going to go and be in the Big Ten and play with the big boys, that means it's Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin. But leadership be damned, Nebraska has found itself in rivalries and close games with Northwestern, Purdue, Illinois, Rutgers, and that was just not what people envisioned. And it's really by Nebraska's own leadership's own undoing. But I don't think we would have had the NU rivalry as.
It was under the radar, you're saying?
I don't think it was even on the radar. I don't think you had the radar plugged in. I just never thought that was going to be the case.
I mean, who would have thought 10 years later, after joining the Big Ten, more than 10 years later, you'd have a 500 record against Northwestern? That is one of those stats that I think if you told somebody in 2010, like, hey, in 2023, Nebraska's going to be 500 against Northwestern, they'd call you crazy. That's
like the Iowa State Big 8 days, where once every 10, 15 years you go over there and you lose. It just didn't happen very often. It was a stunner.
All that said, the Northwestern teams that are dangerous historically are the ones that you don't expect to be good.
Right.
And this is a Northwestern team that I think everyone thought was going to be terrible, with Pat Fitzgerald, the longtime coach, losing his job in July. And you got this guy, David Braun, and I think back to Big Ten Media Days in July, and just how much of a deer in headlights he appeared to be. Not through anything related to his own fault. It was because his athletic director was hiding in the back hallways at the stadium in Indianapolis doing one interview while everybody wanted to get a piece of that guy and just had to take it out. They didn't bring players. They had to take it out on this first-year assistant coach who was a defensive coordinator, came from North Dakota State. His wife was expected to go into labor any day to give birth to their child.
And he was praying that it happened then.
Right, so he could get out of coming to this thing. And Northwestern would be represented by no one.
Can we induce?
And to think that they're 3-3.
Yeah,
They've got the same record as Nebraska. This is a team that beat Minnesota with a great comeback. Beat UTEP. They beat Howard. Hey, it's a win. Nebraska has a win against Northern Illinois. So probably not much different. No offense.
Nebraska's 3-3 is pretty similar to Colorado's 3-3.
I mean, no offense.
Like, legitimately.
Do not come at me, Northern Illinois.
The one universal opponent you have is Minnesota, who Nebraska lost to. And I think week 1, you can assume Nebraska is a much better team now than they were back in week 1 against Minnesota. But Northwestern beat them. Northwestern has some losses to some teams that are currently in the top 25, and they have a couple of wins over teams that you'd expect them to get wins again, in all honesty, despite how bad we expected Northwestern to be. UTEP and Howard. I mean, Nebraska's got wins over Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech, who aren't great. You have a win against a Big Ten foe in Illinois, which is same as Northwestern win over a Big Ten foe in Minnesota. And then you have a bad loss to a great Penn State team, a bad loss
who
to
they pushed for a while.
Who they pushed for a while, and then a bad loss to a Rutgers team who wasn't that great. But hey, Nebraska's got a loss to a Colorado team that we can see now isn't that great. These 3-3 records are pretty similar coming into this.
They are.
You've got a ton of heart in Northwestern. They're completely fighting through all of it. And to your point about this being a 500 rivalry / series, I mean, you've got to really count your blessings. It's 10-year anniversary of the Westerkamp Hail Mary catch in 2013. You've had some insane endings, and it all started off on the wrong foot. The last time Nebraska was ranked in the top 5, Mr. Ebert and company won in Lincoln 28-25, the Taylor Martinez team, year 1 of the Big Ten.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the last time they met on the field in Ireland. When,
the international incident.
I mean, if we can somehow reenact the onside kick in this game.
Because we all need to grab a cocktail right now.
Well, that game was determined by Northwestern's offensive line. They just dominated Nebraska in the second half of that game. And I don't think their offensive line is going to do the same thing to whatever Nebraska, however Nebraska lines up against them this week. That they ran the ball against Nebraska like Nebraska used to run the ball against everybody else, just blowing them out, run after run after run after run, and wearing them down. The onside kick was misguided, although if you take a look at the replays, if the ball's just kicked a little 2 yards to the left or the right, it may be recovered. But anyway, was poorly executed and not well thought out, but given the time frame of the game. But I still say it was they just manhandled Nebraska last year, and that's very difficult to say.
Yeah.
Now, I also with Northwestern, I don't think you can discount the fact. Look, Skip Holtz is on that staff as a analyst or whatever gray area that title is. He's been around a long time. He may not have very, very high profile jobs. What's he been at, like Louisiana Tech or UConn and whatnot? But he has won the last couple of USFL championships. But I do think that has been a nice resource for that staff to have somebody like that. Even the name, lose battling with Ryan Day, and that's fine. But Skip Holtz under the radar, I think, is somewhat of maybe a calming thing for a new head coach that has helped pilot him through this season. I don't think you can discount that.
2023 is the year of the Holtz renaissance in college football. We never would have imagined. You talk about Northwestern's offensive line from last year, and Peter Skoronski was a superstar of an offensive tackle for the Cats, and he's gone to the NFL. So whatever advantage Northwestern had up front in the game a year ago, I would expect that to be gone. I mean, we can talk all day about how Northwestern's overachieved and they're 3-3 and they had a great comeback against Minnesota. Nebraska, it would be inexcusable for Nebraska to blow this game. It's just considering what the place that we're at in the season and some of the momentum that they've gained and coming out of this bye week. It's a must win. And you hate to say that because those are the games in years past where Nebraska's just found a way to lose it. But the hope for Matt Rule and this group is that they're starting to get past that. And maybe the Illinois game and the way that it went in the end when they tried their darndest to lose that game in the fourth quarter and they still won it by 13 points. Maybe that's another opportunity, another possible moment where this team has turned a corner. Matt Rule says he thinks the team turned a corner in their development as a program with that goal line stand on the first possession for Illinois. Maybe just that game in general is something that this team can look back to at the end of this season and say that it was a big moment.
I'm going to choose to look at that a different way, that the offense was challenging Nebraska's defense to go out and win that game. We're going to give you opportunity after opportunity in the fourth quarter when it matters most for you guys to come through. That's how we can choose
we're
to look at
that. Pretty deep, brother.
That is spinning to get dizzy.
Hats off to Anthony Grant and his boys.
Anthony loves his teammates so much.
They were such team players in that situation. Yeah.
Let's do it during live bullets, Elijah.
With a spin job like that, Bill should run for president. But I guess the best way to put my feelings, and I think based on what I've heard from you guys guys probably feel the same. We all feel good about Nebraska's chances at winning this, but Nebraska by 12 seems a little hairy. That's about how I'm feeling right now.
It's going to be another one possession. Northwestern's going to make you sweat it out. It's probably turnovers, and Nebraska will. I mean, I think Rule gets what's coming in here, and it's 3-3 Northwestern, but they're dangerous because everyone's dangerous to Nebraska right now. Nebraska's dangerous to Nebraska still at this point.
Yeah, Nebraska is a 12-point favorite against a Big Ten opponent is a large number for me.
Are you feeling the same way about that as you did Indiana plus 33 last weekekend?
Hey, they looked good on that until they didn't.
Yeah.
That was a great first half performance from Indiana.
Started early at 21-7 at halftime. Elijah sped down to the old sports book and was going to put a G down, and we had to have an intervention and said no. Guys, let's talk about the college football weekend. That was pretty entertaining. Again, subscribe to us, the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show is where you find us, the AJ Sports Pod on Twitter. And, of course, be sure to find us both locations, Spotify and iTunes, for the audio portion of the podcast. Guys, you had the Big Ten West rock fight that was Iowa, Wisconsin, all sorts of bone-crushing hits on quarterbacks. Illinois came to play. They did not fear the turtle. And you had USC Notre Dame that was glorious, especially if you're not a big USC guy. And then the walk-off win and some questionable coaching by Oregon and the over-aggressiveness by Mr. Lanning.
Well, I think I nailed my snack predictions. Washington, Oregon was definitely flaming hot Cheetos. Couldn't put it down.
That was great.
Wisconsin, Iowa was regular Pringles. Yay, there's other things on I'd prefer to be watching, but I did go check back in and occasionally take a little bite off of that game. I think I nailed my snack predictions. That's how I feel about the college football weekend. And that 2:30 window was a fantastic window. It made up for how bad 11 a.m. was.
It was, but there were 4 games. I'm not quite sure what to deem the Illinois Maryland game, what snack that was.
I'm going to tell you right now, Colorado Stanford was a cohiba and a port after that was over with. Yeah.
You had the cigar and wine going. I love it.
Very satisfying.
Yeah, I forgot the Buffs there, and that was incredible to see that collapse.
That was like a Long Island iced tea.
4 of them.
In Applebee's $1 Long Island iced tea is what that was.
And then
free shout out.
And then
Monday.
the next night, just up the road in Fort Collins. Who saw that?
Oh, amazing.
Who saw that?
They're come back against Boise.
Well, none of the Colorado State fans did. You see the crowd at the end of that game?
I talked
15 people there.
I talked yesterday to an old friend of Nebraska, Tim Cassidy.
Okay.
The former football ops guy under Bill Callahan, who is a native Nebraskan and is deeply connected to the state of Nebraska and is the right-hand man now for Jay Norvell, former Nebraska OC, who is the head coach at Colorado State. And you can go online and see Jay Norvell dancing in the locker room at 3 a.m. with his players after that incredible win where they were down by 20 points with about 6 minutes to play. Actually recovered 2 onside kicks. One of them was disallowed for some unknown rule about how you can't block a player unless the ball has gone 10 yards.
Yeah.
I knew about not recovering the ball, but whatever. Colorado and Colorado State on back-to-back nights. First, the Buffs blow a 29-point halftime lead, and then Colorado State comes back from a 20-point deficit halfway through the fourth quarter to pull off a Hail Mary victory against Boise State, which it had never beaten. The Rams had never beaten Boise State. So the lesson here is don't go to sleep. Friday night, Saturday night, whatever. Sunday night, Monday night, you can go to sleep.
Houston beating West Virginia on Thursday.
Yeah. Right. Don't go to sleep on college football because if it's the late night game, it's going to be crazy at the finish.
The After Dark has been electric and a ton of fun, and you're not believing your eyes. I want to go to some folks averting their eyes. I'm not quite there just because I love the hard hits, but let's talk West for a moment. With the Wisconsin loss, that door is open for about everybody else. Iowa right now finding a way. You kind of got to respect it for sure defensively, but they got one big play and a couple of field goals, and they got out of Madtown with a win.
So it was a scoring explosion.
Well, they could have ran a pick six back. Castro at the end of the ball game just slid down to burn the clock, and they went into the old victory formation.
Does he know what he's doing to his offensive coordinator?
Big old Brian scream at him, "Don't you go down! You keep running, son."
I think can they put an end to the drive for 325? Because they're not going to get it.
No.
They're not going to get it.
But they still might go 11-1.
They could go 11-1 and average like 19 or 20 points a game. From here on out, Iowa's got home against Minnesota, at
four home games
at Northwestern, home against Rutgers, home against Illinois, and then at Nebraska. So three of the last 5 are at home, and they just have to go to Nebraska and to Northwestern.
That's 5 games where if your offense doesn't get off the bus, your defense can realistically still win you those football games.
I mean, 11-1 is not even far-fetched for this offensively horrendous team.
Iowa is closer to the college football playoff than anyone cares to admit.
Did you see Caitlin Clark scored more points at Kinnick Stadium yesterday than the Iowa offense has in any game? Well, they had 41 against Western Michigan, so I'm not sure. I don't think she had that, but
could have.
Yeah, point taken.
Look, they might. You can talk about college football playoff. They would still have to play in a Big Ten championship game. And whether it is Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State, as the Nittany Lions have already proven, they ain't going to the top of the podium at the Big Ten championship game. All right, so they can win the West, but they're not going to the college football playoff against one of those 3 teams. And they got to come to Lincoln at the end of the year. They might be motivated, but that could be much more of a rock fight than people over there want to admit.
Okay, so from the land of completely bizarre scenarios, what happens if Iowa loses again? So they go into the Big Ten championship game at 10-2. Let's say Nebraska knocks them off in Lincoln on Black Friday. They go in at 10-2 and then beat Michigan.
Oh. The Big Ten will be shut out of the playoff.
You're 11-2. Well, I mean, maybe the losing team gets in and the winning team stays home.
No, the team
that's
that doesn't
hilarious.
make the Big Ten title game would probably make it. If it's Michigan-Iowa, and Michigan loses to Iowa, Penn State or Ohio State, whoever wins on Saturday is probably the team that makes. And the Big Ten is going to get a team in the college football playoff this year.
I can't envision a scenario where they would get shut out.
Well, Iowa would be
and it wouldn't be Iowa.
But say it's a one-loss Iowa team somehow.
Well, if it's a one-loss Iowa team that wins the Big Ten championship,
Yes.
they're in.
Then they would get in. It's just not going to happen.
Even if it's over a one-loss Penn State team that crushed them, but they don't get a rematch.
A one-loss Penn State team that didn't make the conference championship.
Yeah.
Yeah, 12-1 Iowa gets in.
There'd be upheaval.
There would be.
Imagine how Wisconsin fans were already on Twitter over the weekend saying the new Wisconsin just lost to the old Wisconsin, and they're upset about that. Do you know how upset Wisconsin fans would be if they had a massive offseason of upheaval of what made Wisconsin over the past 20 years, and then Iowa goes and makes the college football playoff?
All right.
This is far-fetched.
Let's just play far-fetched then. Beat Northwestern, beat Purdue, win at Michigan State, knock off Maryland at home, upset Wisconsin on the road. Iowa comes to town Black Friday, and who goes to play in the Big Ten championship game?
You're talking about 9-3 Nebraska, making it to the Big Ten championship, and then clearly beating Michigan because we've seen they can do that.
I didn't say that far-fetched. I just
10-3 Nebraska. Oh wait,
That's a New Year's 6 Nebraska team.
hey, Wisconsin on Saturday. You talk about the old Wisconsin playing the new Wisconsin. How do you think this is going over today in Madison? Wisconsin threw 50 passes in that loss. And I don't think it was all that nice in Madison on Saturday afternoon, weather-wise. 50 passes.
Yeah.
With a backup quarterback.
They've got 6 games. Yeah, right. The backup quarterback, Braden Locke, threw 30 of those 50 passes.
Yeah, that's not what they're used to.
They've got 6 games left. How's this going to work for Luke Fickell? And what does he got to do to that offense to get them playing to their strengths?
I think you line up I formation.
Yeah, they got to go back to old Wisconsin.
They're not going to.
Not with Phil Longo, they're not.
No.
You've seen Nebraska and Marcus Satterfield have the ability or whatever, the patience, the lack, whatever the opposite of stubbornness is, to trade in their offense in September for some version that they did not see happening, running the option with Heinrich Harburg. And Wisconsin is throwing 50 passes on October 15th.
Someone's on the bat phone right now in Florida to Barry Alvarez. We need you back here, Barry, and we need you to have a stern talking to with the OC and the offensive line. And do you want to win or do you want to build for the future and have a losing season and get off on the wrong foot if you're Fickle, who's a tremendous coach, but this just ain't working. This reminds me of Callahan year one.
I don't want to say it's not working yet, but you do worry about the long-term sustainability.
Well, they're up next against Ohio State. Ohio State's going to drill them. That's after the fact they just got smoked by Iowa. I mean, 15-6? Is that the final?
Well,
15-6.
The question is going to be how much pull does what Luke Fickell have at Cincinnati continue over the next couple of years in terms of recruiting? Because I think that's why they're throwing 50 passes against Iowa. They're trying to show
advertise
their future recruits, hey, this is what we want to do at Wisconsin. We're going to turn you into an NFL quarterback. We're going to turn you into an NFL wide receiver, whatnot. How long does your pull in recruiting last being Luke Fickell and what you do at Cincinnati if you continue having poor results like this? And let's be clear that Iowa's defense is probably the class of the Big Ten West. As of right now, that's a tough task for that Wisconsin offense, especially with a backup quarterback. But that's a tough result to get in year one whenever you're publicizing, hey, we're bringing Wisconsin's offense into modern college football, and you go put up 6 points against Iowa. That's 1980.
But you just mentioned recruiting NFL quarterbacks, NFL receivers. The Wisconsin way is getting what's their recruiting going to look like up front with offensive linemen.
It's turning
because
local
I can go back about 20 years and remember sitting in a press conference where an athletic director said we need to produce NFL quarterbacks and wide receivers, and look where that got. The school down the block. That's exactly what the 4-year case of the flu said. We need to start getting NFL caliber recruits for receiving and quarterback, and it's just not what this program was built on. And if that's what Wisconsin is going to do, and not have those big guys up front,
they better
get away from their own iteration of the pipeline. I would hate to think that they're going to be wandering in the wilderness for the next 20 years as Nebraska has done, because the exact same words were uttered.
Well, there would be some irony there in the wake of Barry Alvarez.
And wasn't that program built on the Nebraska blueprint with Barry Alvarez? Right?
Absolutely,
he really said it.
And then who would be the next program to rise up and be the next Wisconsin? And they could have 20 years of success followed by the entry into the wilderness.
All questions, maybe next episode.
That's a great place to end the episode.
Yeah,
I tell you what.
so.
I still want to know if Colorado's going to go to a bowl game, but we can talk about that another time too.
We'll cliffhanger it as Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Episode 9, The Average Joe Sports Show. We'll talk to you later on with another episode, and find a way on YouTube to subscribe to us, The AJ Sports Show, The AJ Sports Pod, on Twitter, and then, of course, Spotify and Apple for The Average Joe Sports Show. We'll talk to you next time.